Hello, we're here again. Gern, Blanston, and Pittsburgh. Pat, how are you doing, Gern?
I'm well, Pat. How are you today?
I'm great, and I'm going to do something that every watcher hates: smash like, because that helps the algorithm and sends this Star Wars related content up the charts, so we can watch Star Wars on YouTube all the time, every day, incessantly. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to take a deep dive into the Return of the Jedi. We did The Empire Strikes Back, but we're going to do Jedi now because we have to. So in my order of ranks, I don't see how anybody can argue with this, but at least, Empire's first.
Of course.
You can argue whether or not Star Wars or Jedi is second, but for me, I think it's Star Wars, and then Jedi's in third. And those top three. I mean, I don't see how. Now, I've seen kids that are like, yeah, the Revenge of the Sith is my favorite movie. And I understand they grew up at a different time. But
Right.
for me, that's where we are.
Right. I would agree with that. I think of the original movies, Star Wars and Return of the Jedi are pretty much even.
Yeah.
Emotional content, I give extra points to Jedi for the father-son conflict.
So that's the thing. I didn't, when I first watched Jedi, it wasn't Star Wars was still far above it in my ranking. But the more I watched Jedi, the more I appreciated what you just said. The father-son, the emotional overtones. I mean, really, this is a movie about daddy issues. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. So the original Star Wars is a swashbuckler. It's
Right.
the Saturday afternoon serial that Lucas and Spielberg grew up going to when they were kids. That's what they grew up on. They wanted to recreate that feeling for a new audience.
Flash Gordon.
Right, and so he achieved that in Star Wars, and I'm sure there are people that have this is all documented elsewhere. I haven't read this extensively about it because I don't read about the movies. I just watch the movies.
Right.
But
I got my own opinions. I don't need to read other people's opinions.
Well, it's really the what's the history? Lucas says many things about, I planned this, I planned that. I had this whole story arc outlined before Star Wars shot.
Well,
Did he
we're going to
really?
blow this away because I've already
Yeah.
got examples in my notes where that is absolutely patently false.
Yeah, that's what I think too, because it just, some things don't add up. But interestingly, he kind of retroactively tries to create that mythology for whatever reason. That's fine. He can do that. He's George Lucas. But what I did in rewatching Jedi was that, because the difference between reviewing Jedi and Empire is so meaty. It's got so much to talk about. There's so many interesting aspects to it. Jedi doesn't really have that. So I thought, what are we going to talk about? Well, let me do this. Let me go back to the DVD and watch it with the commentary track on, which I've never done because I'm usually not interested enough to know, well, I was thinking this and I was thinking that when I did this shot, and et cetera, et cetera. They seem like kind of like padding. But I watched it with the commentary track on, and they had three commentators: Lucas, Ben Burt, the sound designer. So he had all kinds of things to add about, well, I made this sound by banging two trash cans together, and I got this by I ran outside when some English guys were using a jackhammer on Baker Street. Those are interesting, but not that fascinating. And Carrie Fisher she maybe came in maybe 3 or 4 times. It really felt like they just dragged her in and said, we need a third person. She sounded like she might have been drunk at the time. I don't know. But it was interesting because she has no pretense, and she's just like, I'm an easygoing person. I had to do all these fight scenes where I'm angry and I'm shooting people. It's exhausting, and I wanted to stop, but you can't stop because it's a movie. You have to keep going for 8 or 9 or 10 hours a day.
So she talked about acting. She didn't talk about what we're going to talk about.
Correct. So we're going to talk about plot and dramatic impact and so forth.
Sure.
So I wanted to see if I could get some trivia bits from Lucas's own retelling of Jedi. But
that's great, because I watched the Disney version, which I haven't done. I like I said, I usually pop in the DVDs. I don't think I've ever watched the commentary track. But this time I wasn't looking for the differences like I was in Empire. I was just enjoying the movie.
There aren't that many.
And there weren't too many. There were two at the end. There was like the celebration, but that's
the celebration. They really padded that out with scenes from around the galaxy, which I find unnecessary. But again,
It's a tie-in.
I'm an originalist.
Yeah.
But yeah, he didn't monkey with the most of it.
The only thing is I kind of like that cheesy Ewok song that John Williams originally made. I really like that, nub nub da 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 da, and
Yeah.
that's absent now. And it's a shame because I just thought it had a cheery, happy ending kind of feel to it,
It does. It does.
Yeah.
So getting back to the original thread on this about, did he have it all plotted out?
Oh, right.
Yeah, we don't think so. But he speaks about it in retrospect as if he did. So his commentary on this particular DVD that I own apparently was done either while the prequels were being filmed or shortly after they had wrapped up. I'm not sure, because he talks about the prequels and says, well, these all fit in as a piece, episodes 1 through 6. So he kind of backs the story into those prequels to make them all jive together. But why is there less to talk about in Jedi than there is in Empire? He is very upfront about this. He says that I realized that the only pieces left from my original conception of the Star Wars arc were only involved 3 characters: the Emperor, Vader, and Luke. And he said, I realized I didn't have enough content for a complete 2-hour movie. So what am I going to do? So that explains why Jedi is, compared to Empire, a very slow movie until the last quarter.
It's this, what you just described, George's plot with those 3 characters, the Emperor, Luke, and Vader, steals the show. It steals the show. Totally. It's obvious that was written and overwritten and written through. And the scene in the throne room seems to me, I didn't do the actual math, but seems to take up about at least a quarter of the movie, maybe a third if you count the capture of Luke and the conversation with Vader and Luke on the walkway after he gets out of the AT-AT and gets into the, the actual station.
That's where the movie becomes interesting, because quite frankly, okay, it's mildly entertaining, but he talks about the fact that the entire Jabba palace scene at the beginning was padding. He's like, this is how I decided to take up a lot of the slack, because Han Solo turned out to be a much more popular character than I had originally envisioned. So I thought, let's spend time with him and his rescue. So, and it's you have to tie that up because it was the big cliffhanger of Empire, but it really is a very slow moving third opening of the entire movie.
He uses it to reintroduce the characters one at a time or 2 at a time, which is actually kind of interesting. I like that, instead of having the whole ensemble together at once, so that we get, and it's been 3 years, so we get to see them one at a time. We get to see Han and Frozen and Carbonate. We get to see the 2 droids first.
Well, Luke doesn't even come in for what, 20 minutes?
Well, the cutscene with Luke in the cave playing with his lightsaber and giving it to R2, thank gosh they cut that, because that would have been like, well, you ruined one of the best moments, which is when R2 opens that little tiny thing in his dome and shoots the lightsaber up by his spring.
Which is very good, because it's one of those moments where it looks like all is lost. How's he going to get out? How is he going to get out of this? He's lost his weapon.
Yes.
So that's a great little scene.
So I thought it was great. It gives him the legitimacy of being a Jedi, because prior to that, he's trying to use a mind trick on Jabba. It fails. He can do some, he can do a little bit of telekinesis and pull a gun out of somebody's holster, but that's it. And then what else has he got up his sleeve? So this way it looks like Luke had a plan.
Well, and not only that, you feel that he did have a plan, but it seems kind of like a hollow thing, because he has a great line as he's being let out in handcuffs. That's the last mistake you'll ever make. And
it's so un-Jedi to say.
Something. It is. It's out of character.
It's out of character. Really a bad line. It's not even well delivered.
I agree.
It sounds like prepubescent. It sounds infantile,
I totally
adolescent.
Agree. It doesn't read right.
It's not mistake you'll ever make. I'm telling my mom.
It's not the kind of line that you get from somebody who, Jabba's he's a 2-bit gangster.
Right.
Compared to where Luke is at in his arc, he's far beyond this. Right. It's almost a kind of a trivial annoyance that he has to deal with Jabba.
Well, it breaks the mood that when we first see Luke, we see him as a hologram, projected by R2, and he has this wonderfully eloquent, diplomatic, way of, he's like, Jabba, the mighty Jabba, we can negotiate and we can
flatters him.
this can be a win-win for both of us, and we
Right.
can avoid any unpleasantries, and it's wonderful. It's a veiled threat, but it's also a bribe.
And keep these droids.
And that's the way. That's right. These two droids.
I love
we're
that line.
standing, like
Yeah.
make sure you're on your marks, guys. But
Yeah.
and it's like, but that's exactly the way you would approach a gangster, right?
Mhm.
You would
Flattery.
show them that you have some force.
Deference and respect.
You would have deference. Yes, it's like going to the dawn, right? You kiss the ring, you
Mhm.
go to the wedding, you leave a present.
You come to me, you ask for a
Yeah.
favor.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then you take the cannoli, and then and it's like you that's exactly what we're dealing with here. You're dealing with somebody who understands power, so you show that you have power,
That's all
but
you
also
understand.
understands wealth, and you give them the option of taking the money first,
Mhm.
the easy way out. So you
Mhm.
never back somebody into a corner,
Mhm.
especially somebody like that.
Right.
But anyway,
So that was the first big thing I wanted to drop in there, is that if Jedi seems slow, there's a big reason, because he just simply he had run out of story to fill out a third episode.
well, it's true. I mean, the best part, and I think that's what we should focus most of our attention on, is the throne room. But I remember watching it, and at the denouement, after the everything is resolved, I don't want to jump right to the end, but we still have to blow up the Death Star, and it's almost like they're just cleaning this up in the script now. It's like it's exciting, sort of visually. It's very exciting at the time because these special effects were out of this world.
Oh, the end sequence with so both the end battle sequence with the Rebel fleet and the Empire, first rate, top notch.
Yeah.
Even with models of the era, it really holds up. It's very fast paced, very
Yeah.
quick. Everything's moving very rapidly.
Yeah.
The flight through the half-built Death Star, super well done. Also really holds up well.
Yeah.
So that's all very good.
It's just really fast, though. It's almost like we got to get this over with because we got to get to the end. It's like, and it's the only part of the movie where I don't know how they could have done it any other way because of the timing, but that may have been edited better. Like they may have interspliced that scene with another scene in the throne room to make that not one big chunk of time when they're like,
Mhm.
attack the big Star Destroyer now, and then eventually, then boom, immediately it's down. And it's like,
Right.
wait a minute, why didn't you do that like, an hour ago? So if it was that easy, and then, that kind of stuff, little piddly stuff. It was just the pacing.
Well, there's the pacing is at the end. The pacing I thought was decent at the end. I think it's lacking in at least the first half. And Lucas addresses this in his commentary, saying that the problem with throwing out a lot of story threads that need some kind of resolution is
You
that
kind of resolve them.
you have to answer all of them in the wrap up episode. So you have to. The challenge is, how do I fit up tying up all these ends in a compact space? And so this leads me to the point that I wanted to make, is that any long form story arc on screen that I've ever seen almost always has a unsatisfying ending, because the frequently the fun of the story is the heroes are in grave danger. There's a lot of drama. There's interpersonal issues, conflict going on. You just can't see how it's going to be solved. And sometimes writers back themselves into a corner where they can't solve it.
Big time.
And then other times they make a solution and everybody lives happily ever after. And it's almost a letdown from a cliffhanger like you get at the end of Empire. And that's just the mechanics of storytelling. They have to end.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's a good point.
You come out at it on a different emotional place from the midpoint of the story and the end point of the story.
Well, I have to admit, when the movie starts, even the crawl, okay, even like the very first crawl, there you can tell that this script is more mature. It's being written by a more mature writer. There are words in that crawl that just like jump out of at you, like they're key words. They're like if you were gonna like do some SEO or something, it was like friends, vile gangster, clutches of the vile gangster, Jabba the Hutt. More powerful than the dreaded Death Star. struggling to restore freedom to the galaxy. I mean, it's like okay, right, we're in Star Wars now. We're
Right.
doing this. All right, this is good. And then you see the opening scene. They always do the ships, which is awesome because you get to see a really nice cut of the underside of the Star Destroyer. This time with like super refined graphics models still, and then the new ship, which we talked about in the last thing.
Shuttle Siderean.
Yeah, the shuttle. So the shuttle is introduced in the revised version of Empire, which totally sucks because the shuttle was shown like 4 or 5 times in Return of the Jedi, originally called Revenge of the Jedi.
It was originally.
Until the very last minute. Like they made movie posters and everything.
Well, those are probably worth a fortune if anybody has them.
They're collectible. I don't think they're like outrageous.
Really?
Yeah, a couple $100 maybe or something.
Must be a lot of them then.
I don't know, or maybe, I don't know. You know what? I'd have to go ahead and check.
Well, it's a good thing they changed the title because it wouldn't fit a Jedi. It's not right.
It doesn't really fit a Jedi, does it?
Yeah, because only for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Oh, that's such a lie. Never
I know
for
it is.
attack.
I know it is. It is.
That
It
is such. I've been thinking about doing a video just showing Jedis attacking and using the Force.
It's a nice theory.
Gain an advantage. I think.
But we know from the prequels that the Jedi are not all that they say that they are.
You mean they're hypocrites?
Yes.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
They say, yeah, it depends on your point of view.
Yeah.
From a certain point of view.
Yeah.
Which Ben talks about, in this
movie.
movie.
Let's talk about that for a second because
let's do it. Yeah.
So Han is rescued. A pretty decent action sequence. The barge rescue, not bad. And Luke has to return to. Oh, very nice, very nice. So we have a special guest visitor.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, special guest visitor.
I think there's a Jedi in here.
Yeah.
The Return of the Jedi.
That's pretty nice. That's a pretty nice looking blade, by the way. Oh, you got to clean it off every once in a while. Yeah. Yeah. Don't try this at home, younglings. So Luke has to return to Dagobah because he promised to return to complete his training.
Right.
And it's somewhat disappointing that Yoda, who became a breakout character from Empire, very, very popular, gets very little screen time.
He immediately dies, basically.
And dies.
Yeah.
He's
gone.
Very quickly, he's become ill for some reason, and he delivers the dramatic last missing piece of information that was promised in Empire that we speculated about for 3 years as to who the other was. So we, of course, find out that it's Leia.
There is another.
Yeah, and then he has the conversation with Obi-Wan, where Luke's kind of pissed off because he's like, "What do you mean, different point of view, old man? You kidding me? You jag off?"
Yeah, I mean, he does. He delivers that line, and it's like it's not a very satisfying line,
No.
And then what I really like is when Obi-Wan gets tired, the Force Ghost gets tired, and he sits on a log.
I thought about that too. I'm like,
you're a ghost.
Wait a minute, he's sitting on a log.
First of all, how can you possibly sit? And two, is that the way you interact with physical matter? And then and then you're that tired? You're getting 3% of the gross on this movie. Could you stand up for your scene?
Well, I remember where I heard this, but Alec Guinness was very reluctant to come back for the third. He may have even been reluctant to come back for the second movie because he thought the first one was okay. This is a fun romp, and that then
fairy tale nonsense,
right? And then they took themselves too seriously, and he was just not interested. But I guess they dangled enough pounds sterling in front of him that he changed his mind. And thank goodness that they did, because his small cameos really are important to the films.
They really are. I mean, it's pivotal in Empire.
Pivotal.
Yeah.
In Jedi, they could have lived without it.
A few endings, and it introduces the fact that Leia's his sister.
Right. Right.
So
there's that, and Lucas gives an interesting commentary about the Return to Dagobah, which is that he says he consulted with child psychologists.
I heard this,
and I find this okay. I'll take him at his word. It seems extreme to me. But the story is that they said when Vader does the reveal, that many younger viewers will simply assume that Vader's lying, so that it was important for Luke to go back to Dagobah and hear the truth confirmed by Yoda. Otherwise, many people would continue to believe that it was just a cover story.
If that's true, if that some child psychologist told Lucas that, I think that the child psychologist was overthinking and not giving the audience enough credit.
Totally.
Plus, it's almost never a bad thing to have ambiguity in a story, to allow the viewer or the reader of the fiction to come to their own conclusions, which later can be defeated or reaffirmed, and both are satisfying. So
Right.
like when you're like reading a detective story and it's like the butler did it. Oh no, it was the maid, you're not like angry. You're like, oh, that was a fun twist of plot, like it adds a layer to it. So
I agree with you completely. I think it's a little bogus, particularly because it's completely verified by the time you get through the end of the film. There's no, even if there hadn't been the confirmation from Yoda, you would have had no question at the end that.
For me, it's verified in Empire when Luke is laying in the sickbay bed and he goes, "Father."
Yeah, exactly. Right
That's
there.
it.
Right there.
That's
so
it.
if it was a lie, that wouldn't have happened.
No, because he does it instinctively.
Yes.
He does it like it's natural. It is what it is.
Exactly.
It's a fact,
I'm totally in agreement. So let me bring up go ahead.
Oh, well, the only thing I was going to say is what the Return to Dagobah does from an editing point of view is we just saw the arrival of the Emperor on the new Death Star in the scene before that, right? And we see, at least a dozen like fighters, like Vader gets a shuttle, Tidarian type shuttle, and gets 2 TIE fighters escort him in, right? Into like the same hangar actually that the Millennium Falcon goes in on the original Death Star. Basically, it's like
we have to assume that there are many docking bays that look.
There are, but it's an interest. There's a lot of like homages and throwbacks to like scenes in the original Star Wars in this. And one of them is you got this really big hangar, but they don't go in that one. You got these 2 other ones that are medium size over here. They go in this little small one, and it lands there. So for whatever reason, I don't know. I'm sure somebody somewhere wrote some Death Star plans and probably explained all that, but I'm not that deep. So Vader gets 2, but the Emperor, he gets dozens, and then there's every single kind of uniformed troop waiting for him on the flight deck. Okay, so we get to see this pomp, circumstance.
Oh, plus he has his own Imperial Guard have their own special duds.
Yes, and then there's these 2 dudes that I don't even know what they are, like hippies or whatever. They get these giant like head dresses and like, I don't even know what they're. I mean, the red guys are awesome, but like the other 2 dudes, like, are they scholars of the Sith or like what are they? I don't even know what they are.
We don't know. But I did notice them in another scene where they're in the throne room. Briefly.
Yeah. And I don't know what they're like, his buddies or something. I don't know. They're his posse. So
the Emperor's got to have a posse.
So we see all this pomp and circumstance and this evil, mechanized evil, these really glossy uniforms. Everybody's looking smart, sharp.
Oh, it's all triumph of the will stuff.
Ready? Right. And then the contrast, the good guys, they're in a dirty, rainy hovel that's kind of broken down. Yoda has a hole in his blanket. He's got a hole in his pillow after he dies and disappears. It's very humble. There's only 2 of them left.
In classic wisdom tradition, he's eschewed worldly things and attachments.
It's true, but like we see how the odds are stacked against the good guys.
Correct. So interestingly, why in this film, because Lucas talks about the use of color in his commentary, and he calls out of course, the Imperial Guard's red uniforms, red being a symbol of the eagle. He talks about how the windows and Imperial ships in the Star Destroyer always have a web shape to them, which adds to the sinister feeling of it, of the place. But in this film, Luke is dressed in black the entire time.
Yes, I noticed that.
He never talks about that. I for somebody who seems to be so into the symbolism of good and evil, why is that?
Well, for me, it's that, it's all for the payoff at the end. It's that Luke is being tempted to the dark side. Why he doesn't change his clothes. I don't know how I guess you couldn't make him change his clothes at some point.
I think you're right. I think it's important that he be dressed in black at the end when he faces the decision point of which path am I going to take.
But when he's in camo on Endor, he's in camo. So like,
Yeah.
and then he just has these great like black battle fatigues, basically. However, at the very end, when he's at the funeral pyre for Vader, he's got a little flap that's gray. Is that symbolic, or was that there the whole time, or what was that all about? So if they are using that, it's either a costuming choice and it's not consistent, or it was done deliberately. And I don't know, it's just a little triangle of like he had an open flap, and the inside of his lining was like gray. So
right. So the color and the set design to reinforce themes of good and evil are very interesting. And one tidbit before I forget, speaking of docking bay, at the very beginning, when Vader lands, did you ever notice in the foreground, there's a TIE bomber?
I did not.
There's a TIE bomber in the foreground.
That is so awesome. I'm going to have to watch that again.
Go back and check that out. That was like
Wow.
in there the whole time. I just never noticed it because I'm always focused on the shuttle coming in. I wasn't focused on the matte painting in the foreground.
And you're watching the non-retouched version.
No, this is retouched, but it's a matte painting. I'm certain it was there in the original.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
there is another thing in that scene that I don't want to miss. Even though we got to get to the throne room before we like talk too much about non-throne room stuff, because it's going to take us a while to get through that. But
I have other non-throne room things to the throne room before we get there.
Okay, so we'll leave it for last then. So when Vader gets off the shuttle, he says, to Commander Gerard, which we only know his name by the credits, but that guy's great. What a great actor.
He's a sniveling bureaucrat.
He's already going.
Yeah.
Like he's all ready for himself to get choked. He's already,
Emperor
yeah. We shall redouble our
efforts.
But here's the thing: when Vader's they're walking past all the officers in the green uniforms, right? The same uniform as Gerard. They're all commanders. They all have the exact same insignia.
Rank. Right.
And that was a costuming error. I actually went online and checked this out maybe last year. And I'm like, what is up with that? Shouldn't this guy who's building the Death Star, overseeing the building of the Death Star, have like 12 instead of like 6? Right. And they said, yeah, he was supposed to, but the costumer didn't bring the right thing. So everybody was a commander that day. They called it Commander's Day on the Death Star as a joke. And then, and so it stayed.
That's funny.
And the guy who turns over Luke to Vader on the walkway, on the catwalk.
We found this rebel. He was only armed with this.
Thank you, Commander. He's a commander too. Everybody's a freaking commander. There's like 2 ranks in like the entire Imperial or Navy. It's like you're a commander or you're an admiral, and that's it.
Right. Well, presumably
you can be a general. You can be a general.
Well,
General Veers.
Presumably those are the only ranks that can even interact with Vader.
Well, yeah, of course.
I mean, he wouldn't deal with anybody lower.
No, he's not like Kylo Ren going like undercover on Undercover Boss or something. Hanging out with the little guys.
That was a very funny skit.
It was a good skit, but I mean, you and I could have written it. It would have been hilarious. They went this far. We would have gone way too far.
Could have taken a lot further.
We would have done way too much more.